titled Schools of Sociological Theory, we are going to discuss about sociological theories after 60s. In this paper, we are going to discuss about exchange theory and interpretative tradition in sociological theory, critical sociological theories, and neo-functionalism and neo-Marxism. In these 4 modules, we will discuss about the development of sociological theory in the post-60s. As we know, in the first 2 papers, Foundations of Sociological Theory and Sociological Schools of Sociological Theory, first paper. In both these previous papers, we already discussed about the development of sociological theories from 19th and 20th century and early 20th century. In the first paper, Foundations of Sociological Theory, we already discussed about the development of sociology in Europe, especially during the 18th and 19th century. In that paper, we discussed about the origin of sociological theory in Europe in the 18th and 19th century. In that paper, we traced the relationship between the emergence of sociology and social and social and intellectual conditions of 19th and 20th century in Europe. As a discipline, we know sociology emerged first in Europe as a response to the social and intellectual climates prevailing in the Europe of that time. As we know, early social philosophers such as Montesquieu, Condorcet, Saint-Simon, and sociologists like Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, and Emile Durkheim, they engaged with the developments in 19th and 20th early 20th century. As we know, during this period, we witnessed different kind of economic, political, and social revolutions in Europe. As a response to these developments, they tried to understand the society and the social change during that time. And in that paper, we discussed about the contribution of Karl Marx, Max Weber, and George Simmel. In the second paper, Schools of Sociological Theory of 1, we deals new developments within the sociological theorization. In that paper, we discussed the development of functionalism and also we looked at the development of conflict theory, and finally we discussed about symbolic interactionalism and phenomenological perspective in sociology. As we know, during this second phase of sociological theorization, the theater of sociological theorization shifted from Europe to America. We already discussed and had a detailed discussion about this. In this paper, Schools of Sociological Theories, second, we will discuss about 4 theoretical schools such as exchange theory, interpretative traditions, critical theory, and neo-functionalism and neo-Marxism. All these theoretical perspectives help us to extend our understanding of classical and early modern theoretical postulates of sociological theorization, such as Marxism, phenomenological theory, and functionalism. These 4 theoretical schemes, namely exchange theory and interpretative tradition and critical theory, help us to understand the social and cultural developments in the post 60s and 70s. During this time, different thinkers try to understand different social phenomena and social cultural developments in and around the world. So, in this paper, we are going to discuss about the classic about the extension of the classical and early modern social theories. We can see different kind of uh, roots or different kind of different kind of connections with the classical and modern early modern theories. So this paper is an extension of the first and second paper we already studied. So in this paper, in the first module, we are going to discuss about exchange theory. As we know, exchange theory in this paper, in this module, we have four subsections. In the first section, we are looking at anthropological traditions. We will trace the roots of exchange theory from the anthropological tradition. We will look at Malinowski's contribution, Fraser's and Marcel Mauss's contribution. And in the second part, we will look at the contribution of George C. Homans and his proposition of exchange theory. In the third one, we look at Peter Blue's basic exchange principles and cognitive dissonance. And finally, we will discuss about Richard Emerson's social network theory and how it connects with the exchange theory of sociological theorization. As we know, social exchange theory is a major theoretical perspective in sociology. As German sociologist George Simmel noted, exchange is not merely the addition of the two processes of giving and receiving. It involves all lot of social, cultural, and cognitive meanings. The rise of exchange theory was an important theoretical development in the 1950s. The major figures in this development is George Human, and as we know, Skinner's behavioralism is a major source of Human's exchange theory. Before going into details of exchange theory, we have to understand what we mean by exchange. As we know, exchange is not merely an addition to two processes of giving and receiving, it is rather something new. Exchange constitutes a third process, something that emerged when each of those two processes is simultaneously the cause and effect of the other. So, as George Simmel noted, social exchange is not only giving and process of giving and taking. It involves different kind of exchange. If we give something to someone, it doesn't mean that we are giving it some materials. It through this giving or through this taking, we are involving in a social process, and we are involving in a cultural process. So exchange is not merely a giving and taking process. It involves different it has different meanings involved in it. So sociologists understood the importance of this exchange in 1960s. The major figures in this development is George Human, a sociologist who heavily borrowed from the sociological behavioralism of Skinner and other psychologists. And his basic idea in his book Social Behavior, its elements and forms, he noted that the heart of sociology lies in the study of individual behavior and interaction. He was little interested in consciousness or in the various kind of large scale structures and institutions that were of the concern to the most sociologists. His main interest was instead in the reinforcement of pattern, the history of reward and cost that lead people to do what they do. Basically, he argued that people continue to do what they have found to be rewarding in the past. So, the process of giving and taking depends upon the rewards they get through this process or punishment they get through the process. So if we are giving if we are giving something to someone, it means we will get some kind of or other kind of rewards or punishments. So if if he or she want to do the same thing next time, it will depend upon the rewards he got from the previous exchange. So to understand the process of this process, we have to look at the meanings that it's attached with. So the meaning of exchange is crucial in this process. So his work means his works basically represented the birth of exchange theory as an important perspective in sociology. Hume's basic view was that the heart of sociology lies in the study of individual behavior and interaction, as we discussed. Thus, the focus of sociology should not on consciousness or on social structures or institutions, but rather on pattern of reinforcement. So, in the previous sociological theories, as we discussed in the last two papers, focused on social structure and social institutions. But here we are looking at the micro level patterns that help us to understand the social system. So, by looking at this micro level activities or social interactions or social phenomena, we are trying to understand the everyday exchange and everyday process of social interaction. The premise is that interactions are likely to continue when there is an exchange of reward. As we discussed, the reward is important in the process of exchange. It's help us to help the actors to engage with others. So, as we know, the exchange theory got inspired from, or different theorists, they developed their sociological theories from the anthropological, inspired from the anthropological traditions and the works of Malinowski, Fraser, and Marcel Mauss. So, anthropological traditions. So, as we know, different anthropologists, classical anthropologists, went into the fields and did an extensive ethnographic works to understand different social and cultural exchanges and how this exchange creates social system and social setup, social cohesion, social conflict and different kind of social phenomena in a particular community. So through analyzing these micro aspects of social interaction, they try to understand the social structure of different communities, basically indigenous communities. So they mostly looked at non-economic exchanges. So as we know, we have a vast area of economic sociology, which look at the monetary exchange and other kind of economic transactions, and how these economic transactions helps society to develop, and how these economic interaction or economic exchange helps to develop nation and state, etc. Here we are looking at non-economic exchanges. Anthropological exchange theory has grown out of the fact that market institutions in industrialized societies are typically more rudimentary than those found in modern economics. So exchange does exist, but it contains an important element of obligation, whereas market transactions are by definition based on choice. So here this anthropological in the anthropological tradition, exchange is more social and cultural, and it involves different kind of obligations and cultural meanings. The leading anthropologist Malinowski, he studied different communities, and he noted that the social role of gift exchange and it affects on the social cultural development of different communities. The social exchange theory, based on the assumption of rational choice theory, as it explains social change and stability as a process of negotiation between parties. So through this exchange, we can explain social change and social stability among the different social groups. So as we know, indigenous communities or tribal communities are actively participate in different form of exchange, and sometimes it will be material artifacts, sometimes it will be other kind of biological things like human, animal, other things. So this kind of exchange create a social stability and social equilibrium in those communities. So Malinowski recognized the Kula was not only an economic or material exchange network, but also a symbolic exchange, a web of social relation. He studied about the exchange, and he noted that it is not a symbolic exchange. It's not an economic or material exchange, but it has a symbolic meaning. He noted that the exchange of Kula ring is considered to satisfy the psychological needs and societal needs for social interaction and social solidarity. Some of the important finding of Malinowski's is that Kula is considered instrumental and rational as it satisfies the economic needs of the people. And the forces that sustain exchange relation are psychological rather than economic, and it explains social behavior. And symbolic exchange relations are the basic social process that underlay both differentiations of rank in society and integration of society into a cohesive and solitary unit as a whole. So, by the exchange of kula rings, both these communities satisfy their economic needs and also they strengthen their bond among themselves, and also this exchange have a symbolic meaning. This symbolic meaning is important for anthropologists. This symbolic meaning help anthropologists to study the development of this society and the social change that happened among them in different ages. So, anthropological theories about exchange help us to understand the social and cultural meaning related with the exchange process. Marcel Mauss also studied about the social exchange among Jewish families, among different tribal communities. So, as a French anthropologist, he noted that he reinterpreted Malinowski's analysis of the kula and formulated a broader structural exchange perspective. The individuals engaging in such exchange represent moral codes, according to him, that are the rules according to the group. He replaced Malinowski's psychological needs with collective thoughts of Durkheim and emphasized on the representation of individuals in the group. So, according to him, the process of exchange is not between individuals. It is between groups, different groups. So, exchange relations serve and reinforce group morality and it regulate their social life. Thus, Mauss influenced the exchange perspective of modern sociological thought. So, from the individual to group, the shift from individual focus on individual to group is most important in this process. And James Fraser's book Folklore in the Old Testaments may have been the first explicit exchange analysis of social institutions. Fraser wanted to explain the preference among Australian Aborigines for cross-cousin rather than parallel cousins marriage. He offered an economic explanation for this preference. Aboriginal men had no property of sufficient value to exchange for a wife, so they gave a female relative to another man for one who would provide the desired wife. Thus, in Fraser's theoretical perspective, socio-structural patterns are a reflection of individuals' economic motive. His assumption about way in which elementary exchange process create more complex social pattern anticipated those found in many of the individualist exchange perspective founded in contemporary sociology. First, according to him, the exchange process are the result of effort by individual to fill basic needs. Second, exchange process that produce payoff for the interactor lead to the patterning of social interaction. And third, pattern of interaction not only serve individuals' needs but also constrain the kind of social structure that can subsequently emerge. Finally, exchange process lead to the differentiation of power and privilege in social group. Through this process, the exchange process, the process from the individual to group, from the group to a larger collective, the interaction between different groups become a focus of inquiry. So interaction between different groups of people become the focus of study, and through this interaction, through this exchange, material non-material objects, exchange of non-material and non-material object, the interaction become more reasonable, and through this collective effort, society grow and society change subsequently. So the basic of anthropological tradition is that it focuses on small groups and different kind of exchange they perform to understand the social structure, institutional structure, and social change and mobility among them. So sociologists, on the other hand, try to understand different kind of modern exchanges, especially in urban, in so-called modern societies. So George Human's proposition of exchange theory focused on these aspects. In his book, Social Behavior, its elementary forms, he expanded upon several propositions and their connection to the likelihood of individual to behave in a certain manner. This book, rooted in principles of behavioral psychology, looked at behavioral aspects of social exchange. In 1950s, a series of sociological and psychological studies of exchange emerged. George Human adapted behavioral and operant learning tenets to describe behavior among individuals. And his theory of exchange looked at the exchange between individuals and rewards it create. So he focused on the giving and taking process on the basis of reward it offer. The more often an action is followed by a reward, the more likely a person will repeat the behavior. If we get a reward for an action, we will repeat it again. So by repeating, there will be a pattern of behavior. So understanding this pattern, or studying this pattern, we can understand the social and cultural life of a society. The more valuable a particular reward is to a person, the more often he will perform a behavior so rewarded. So, according to him, the reward will decide whether he or she has to continue this kind of exchange. The more often in the recent past an individual has received a particular reward, the less valuable any further unit of that reward become. So, by continuing the same activities for and getting same reward, there will be a stagnation. So, it forces an individual to reconsider his activities, his exchange behavior. So, according to him, the exchange between individual or between a social group depend upon the reward they get from this activity. If a person's action receives a punishment he did not expect, or if a person does not receive a reward he did expect, he will become angry and more likely to exhibit aggressive behavior, the result of which will become more valuable to him. So, getting reward or not getting reward is, or getting punishment is the basis for the exchange. So, if you look at our daily interaction with others, with our parents, with our children, with our students, we can see this kind of pattern, behavioral pattern. The exchange of the exchange will be on material basis. Sometimes it will be on non-material basis. So anyway, the interaction between individual and group depends upon the reward he or she get. And another important theoretical contribution in exchange theory is Peter Bloom's basic exchange principles. First, Bloom's framework was not based on principles of behavioral psychology. Instead, he introduced microeconomic reasoning to the analysis of distinctively social exchange. So, from behavioral psychology to microeconomic reasoning, Peter Bloom tried to explain the exchange principles in society. His major contributions were to the study of microsocial structures, analyzing the large-scale system of organization, social classes, and the dimensions around which society are structured. At the same time, he was the author of a enduring influential micro-sociological studies of exchange relations. He was one of the founders of the field of organizational sociology and co-authored heavily influential studies of American occupational structure that transformed the study of social inequality and mobility. In his book Exchange and Power in Social Life, he tried to understand primarily small-scale exchange theory and tried to apply it to large-scale issues. Although it has some notable weakness, it constitutes an important effort to theoretically integrate large and small-scale sociological issues. So, the contribution of Peter Bloom is that he shifted the theater of exchange theory from behavioral psychology to micro level economic institutions. He explicitly introduced the notion of emergent process into his theoretical treatise, not only rejecting reductionism but also expanding the theory to extend far beyond its original sub-institutional basis. For the for Bloom, the exchange process exchange focused on the process of the Blue focused on the process of exchange, which in his view direct much of the human behavior and underlying relationship among individuals as well as among groups. In effect, Blue envisioned a four-stage sequence leading for interpersonal exchange of social structure to social change. First step involved personal exchange, transaction between people giving to rise to. Second, differentiation of status and power, which lead to legitimization and organization, which sow the seeds of opposition and change. So, the process of social exchange involved a social change. So, this exchange process involved different kind of activities and interactions. Personal exchange sometimes involve some kind of power relations. That power relation create conflict or sometimes imbalance in society, and it leads to social change. Throughout his works, Blue contrasts and compare social exchange process in simple structure with those in more complex social structure and institutions. The major social forces he analyzed include differentiation, integration, organizations, and opposition that steps up the dialectical necessity for the explanation of structural exchange. So, the structural elements from individual or from social behavioral pattern to structural elements, structural little macro process of exchange is the shift that Bloom focused. On the other hand, Richard Emerson, social network theory, initiated the research on social exchange networks when he concluded that social exchange theory was limited by its focus on two-person or dyadic or exchange relations. So here the social network become an important focus of study. Emerson's original intent was to develop a theory of social exchange in which social structure is taken as a dependent variable. So, social structure and social network of different individuals and groups become a focus of Emerson's theory. In his work, there are three factors influenced. First, instead of exchange theory as a broader framework for power and dependence, his interest was on exchange or exchange that involve power and dependence. Also, he used behavioralism as a basis for his exchange theory and wanted to deal with social structure and social change by analyzing social relations and networks. So he focused on power relations first, and finally he want to understand social change and social network through the network through social networks. According to him, an exchange networks has the following components. There is a set of either individual or collective actor. Valued resources are distributed among the actors. Third, there is a set of exchange opportunities among all the actors in the network. Some exchange opportunities have developed into actual actually used exchange relations. Exchange relations are connected to one another in a single network structure. So these 5 points focus on give a detailed picture of his exchange network theory. In sum, an exchange network is a specific social structure formed by two or more connected exchange relations between the actors. The idea of an exchange network links exchange between two actors to more macro level phenomena. Each exchange relation is embedded within a large exchange network consisting of sets of connected exchange relations. By connected, it is mean that the exchange is one relationship affect the exchange in another. So the network, the focus of network theory is that it try to understand the interconnection between different groups or different individuals in a network of exchanges. So here Emerson and as we know Peter Bloom also linked the exchange process with power relations. Power relation is important in this process of exchange network. So in this module we focused on social exchange theory we traced it from the anthropological tradition to the contemporary developments. We looked at contribution of different scholars in the analysis of networks, in the analysis of exchanges. In the second module, Interpretative Tradition in Sociology, we look at interpretative sociology, which focus on the meaning of people attached to the social world. It shows that reality is constructed by people themselves in their daily lives. Since sociology was founded as a discipline in the 19th century by the French philosopher Auguste Comte, the study of society had developed in several different ways. As we know, we last 2 papers we discussed in details how different sociologists try to understand social interaction and social relations. Interpretative sociology can be defined as a study of society that focuses on discovering the meaning that people attach to their social world. In sociology, the study of interpretative sociology occupies central importance. This can also be loosely defined as understanding rooted in the concept of Westerheld, as we discussed in the Weber's theory. So, interpretative sociology was initiated by German sociologist Max Weber and developed by George Simmel and others. Interpretative sociology aims to understand the meaning behind the action through the subject's position within a system of meanings. Interpretative sociology sees reality as being constructed by people according to their own understanding of the phenomena. So, interpretative sociology focuses on the meaning the actor attached with any kind of activities or any kind of social phenomena. So, interpretative sociology relies on qualitative method and data. So, as we know, interpretative sociology heavily influenced from the contribution of Max Weber. His theory of Westerheim and other. As in the first chapter, first paper, we discussed it in details. First classical sociological theory paper, we discussed it in detail. So we are not going into the details of this theoretical contribution, Weber's understanding of